Hi everyone. So when we look back into our lives and we think of moments that have shaped us, there are some really specific moments that we can think of. For some, it might be their first time riding a bicycle without training wheels, their first love. Well, for me it was the Mayan apocalypse. December 2012 was the month where I would spend countless nights researching the possible end of the world. And I know every once in a while someone comes out with the possibility of the world ending in the next few weeks or so, but for me this one seemed really realistic. And I think a lot of that has to do with either this cinematic masterpiece or the amount of media coverage that the apocalypse in 2012 had. I would spend countless nights finding articles that said things like, the world is going to end, X group believes so. And this wasn't from www.doomsday.net, but from real and credible news sources like The Telegraph and The Guardian. And the fact that it was someone's actual job to be able to find the plausibility of the world ending made it even more realistic for me. But the media has been sensationalizing issues for decades, so much so that presently, it seems that the only issues we really care about are the issues that the media tells us to care about. Part of the problem is that we live in such a connected world. Most of you have probably checked your phones before walking into this room, being in this room right now. Some of you might be on your phones right now. No judgment. It's just become a part of our lives to be connected, to be saturated in media. We can't go more than 30 seconds without having some sort of billboard, magazine, or text alert being thrown at us. Last week, my roommate dropped her cell phone in the toilet, and she went a whole week without a cell phone. And I don't know how she made it, but it's just become a part of our daily lives. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't criticize it. Part of the problem with being connected all the time to media is that we haven't increased the amount of analysis of the information that we receive. So nowadays we have access to so much information so quickly, and yet we haven't become more analytical as a society. So anyone can become a journalist nowadays, reading a headline or a news article and writing some post about it that they can broadcast to hundreds. But that's not the only problem. Another issue is the actual content we receive being either flawed or not the most important information. Dr. Donald Shaw and Dr. Max McCombs, in their theory, the theory of agenda-setting research, showed that the problem with media selectivity is that the media doesn't actually show reality at all. It rather filters and shapes the world around us. So, for example, in the United States, we're really involved in the Middle East. So we hear a lot of information about that. But what we miss out on is Eastern Asian news, unless the United States is forging a new trade deal with China. African news, unless an Ebola crisis breaks out that might affect us. Or European news, unless Vladimir Putin decides to ride shirtless on horseback. Again. This is from Reuters, which is a really credible news source, and it's an article about Putin's macho image. And I'm sure more important things were happening that day, but when we look around, it's easy to see how we've fallen into this trap of entertaining news that might only be relevant to us. I mean, a Google search for apocalypse found 63 million results. So it's no surprise that I had this huge fear of the world ending. A Google search for twerking reaches 37 million results. And a Google search for Kylie Jenner's lips also found around 27 million results. So it seems like as a nation, we're really interested in Kylie Jenner and twerking. But these aren't the most important things, hopefully. When we look around, there's definitely more important issues that we should be caring about, but we don't, just because the media doesn't report on them. This is a really interesting image I found that is from February of 2007, so it's a little outdated, but it's still pretty important. This was done by, it was part of a research project done by students from Columbia that showed the amount of media coverage we have of different countries. So the larger the country is, the more media coverage we had. So that big blue mass on the left, or on your left is the United States, so it makes sense that we had a lot of coverage about that. But that yellowish mass in the center is Iraq. And so the combination of news coverage of Iraq and the United States in February of 2007 was much more than all of the other countries combined. And that's a problem, because when we look at February of 2007, a lot of other important things happened. In India, 67 people died because of a deadly explosion. The Italian Prime Minister stepped down. Palestinian coalition forces decided to work together to have talks and form a government. And so important things are happening, it's just we don't hear about them as much. We're allowing the media to tell us what is important and what we should care about just because they report on it more. In March of 1967, there was a military coup and takeover in the Republic of the Union of Myanmar, then known as Burma. During this time, thousands of Muslim Burmese minorities were put into labor camps or deported from the country, and thus insinuated one of the largest genocides in Southeast Asia. A lot of people don't know about this. I know about this because my family lived in Burma during the time, and although most of them fled in the revolution, my uncle was held in a war camp for many years. I was told upon release he was almost unrecognizable because of the harsh conditions of the camp. But the worst part about this is that it is not just history. Burmese ethnic cleansing is still happening today, with just last year the largest issue in Southeast Asia being thousands of Rohingya minority being trapped in the Pacific Ocean because of the inability of other Eastern Asian nations to take them in. The media reporting on just the most relevant things, what they believe is relevant for us, is making us quantify human atrocities by what they believe is important. Remember the Google searches? A Google search for ISIS found 47 million results, which is definitely something important and what we should be talking about. But a Google search for Burmese ethnic cleansing only resulted in 180,000 results. The people suffering under the reign of ISIS are not suffering any more or less than the people suffering in Burma, which is exactly why we can't allow the media to tell us they are. In an address to the public, Narendra Modi, newly elected Prime Minister of India, noted that the media should be much more like the honeybee, stinging to make a lasting impact, and less like the fly, simply spreading dirt. But until the media can heed Narendra Modi's warning, we must take it upon ourselves to understand much more what the media is telling us and how it affects not only us, but the society and the world that we live in. Part of the solution comes from a really easy way by diversifying your sources. So instead of just getting CNN updates and thinking that's the most important thing that happened in the world, diversifying your sources by local sources. So if you're interested in Israel, read the Times of Israel, the China Daily, Rio de Janeiro Times. They're all really great local sources that you can use to become more informed about places that you are interested in. But the second solution is much more difficult because it must come from within us. When the attacks in Paris occurred, they occurred just a few hours after attacks in Beirut. And a lot of people were really upset that Paris had a continuing news coverage, 24 hours almost, on who was attacked, how many passed away, and who the attacker could be. And yet, even though people were upset about it, it didn't seem like we really cared about the attack in Beirut as equally as we did as the attacks in Paris. This became really real to me last week, with the attacks in Brussels occurring around the same time as the attacks in Lahore, Pakistan. I couldn't believe that an attack would occur in such a westernized city like Brussels or Paris. And yet, when I thought about it, even though I have a personal and familial connection to Lahore, I was still more taken aback by the attacks in Brussels and Paris. So there's something internalized within us where we only care about people that are in our small scope. We must work to maximize the amount of people we care about, because the media selecting the people we care about has been a long time coming. So when we look at how the media selects the information we hear, and then understand that it creates this news cycle that may not be the most important, we must look towards finding our own news sources and really thinking about how we view the world around us, in order to equally care about human atrocities and human suffering occurring everywhere. And so what I think the most important thing I've learned from my countless nights researching the possible end of the world is that, surprise, the world didn't end. And for me to believe that just because the media reporting on it was the reason it would was ridiculous. And so we can all work to move forward and diversify our sources and care about a larger group of people. And even though it might not be easy, it definitely won't be the end of the world.